Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Please check out the KCC Discord linked in the description down below. There you can talk to me and a whole bunch of KCC fans who hang out there on a regular basis. I look forward to seeing you there. Our first story today comes to us from Tacky Queen. Non-flexible break time? I mean, if you insist. Let's jump right in. I posted recently about my hot pink duct tape shoe saga, and I thought of another much dirtier and less fabulous debacle that I should share here. This particular issue predates my election as union president, but most of the supervisors remain the same. To recap, many years ago, I worked for a very large company with a fairly powerful union. I was serving as a griever, read complaint department, for the union at the time, though that's not a huge part of this tale. I was, at that point, working in a part of the campus that was exceptionally dirty at all times. Part of my daily task was to walk around looking for giant piles of carbon dust dumped by machinery and to shovel it into barrels and dispose of it. These piles of carbon were safety concerns because carbon dust is highly flammable, and obviously the goal was to minimize the amount of loose carbon dust floating around. So I needed to remove it as soon as I was aware of its presence. Not an easy job, but I was super into fitness at the time, and I kind of enjoyed the physical part of this job. Now, given the environment, when I was on shoveling patrol, I'd be in full head-to-toe PPE, so Tyvek, gloves, respirator, safety glasses, a pain in the butt to put on and take off. In general, once I started a job, I'd prefer to finish it rather than removing my PPE for 15 minutes just to get fully suited back up and go back. So this fateful day, I was cleaning up a particularly obnoxious and large pile of carbon. My watch buzzed, alerting me that it was break time, but I figured I had 15 to 20 minutes left of work, and it would be a huge waste to strip down just to suit back up in new gear for another 15 to 20 minutes. Naturally, I opted to finish the task. About 30 minutes later, I was done, out of my safety gear, and washed up to sit down for a 15-minute break in an air-conditioned break room. Absolute bliss. Then, as luck would have it, no more than 2 minutes later, as I'm minding my own business eating string cheese, one of the supervisors walked in and asked why the hell was I in the break room off of break time. I told her about the carbon spill and how it didn't make sense to leave the job unfinished and waste equipment when I could just finish the job in one go. We also generally prioritize cleaning up potential safety hazards in a timely manner. I was informed that I was being written up for not taking my break at the correct time, and that I was forfeiting that break by missing it. I told the supervisor she couldn't legally take my break time due to her deciding to change the policy, so she graciously allowed me to finish my remaining 10 minutes. I couldn't really fight the write-up because technically we did have set break times, and the practice of moving break times was unique to the particular building I was working in due to emergency safety hazards requiring attention. This building was close to a century old. Sometimes there were floods, carbon dumps, oil spills, etc. The catastrophic issues like that were our domain, and was informal, so we never had a written agreement allowing us to move breaks as needed for urgent jobs. So shortly after, the 5 to 6 of us working in the building were all called together and informed that under no circumstances could we take our breaks outside of set times. In case of emergency, we required verbal permission from a supervisor to do so. Famous last words. As you can probably predict, a few weeks later, all 5 employees from my department present were called for an emergency removal of a combined oil and carbon spill. This is very heavy, very dirty, and fairly dangerous work. The entire factory had to stop production until we got this cleaned up. The plant manager was actually shoveling alongside of us to try to move everything along faster. 30 minutes later, I realize it's less than 15 minutes before we have to go on lunch. I mentioned this to my coworkers, to which we all grumble. I explained to the plant manager that we have been told that we cannot work over our lunch break without permission or risk write-ups, so I was going to make a call to get permission. I called every supervisor we had in those 15 minutes, not a single one answered. Apparently, they'd all gone to lunch together and didn't want to be bothered. I came back in and told the crew I couldn't reach anyone. They all tried calling as well, and nothing. The plant manager called our supervisors, they didn't even pick up for him. So we apologized to the plant manager, and we went on lunch, leaving the plant down for an additional 30 minutes. By the time we'd come back from lunch, we'd still been unable to reach any member of supervision. We finished the job, cleaned up, and went back to our usual tasks as the production started back up. Apparently, the plant manager did eventually get a hold of the supervision team because they showed up furious at us for going on our lunch, up until I reminded them that they'd already written me up for moving a break without consent previously. Apparently, the plant manager and head of manufacturing absolutely tore into them for not answering any calls for over 60 minutes and causing production to halt. They quickly decided that they would no longer be enforcing that rule and gave us discretion on when and how is best to take our breaks after that. Not quite as fabulous as hot pink duct tape, but it was pretty darn enjoyable. OP was asked in the comments down below if they ever requested to have the write-up removed. They responded that they did, but they wouldn't retroactively remove it, as they reasoned OP acted against policy at the time. It was semantics, but it wasn't a winning fight. One thing I'm not understanding from this story is that if the plant manager was there, why didn't they just override their supervisors and tell you to stay? Because they have that ability, they're above the supervisors. The supervisors wouldn't get you in trouble when their boss is the one telling you to continue your work. So something here's not adding up to me, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Comment down below. Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. This next story comes to us from H. Milo Love. A supervisor told me I was unimportant, so I acted unimportant. Let's jump right in. A little background info, I work in a satellite office outside of the country where my company is headquartered. We are all on work visas, except for some custodial staff. Up until about last week, we had about 4 employees to cover a very dense load of administrative work. 1 new employee arrived last week, so now we have got 5. During the time this all took place, we had 1 officer that covered legal matters, 1 that covered budgetary matters, 1 that did HR, and me, who gets to do just about everything else. Without saying too much about my job, let's just say the entire world rests on my shoulders in terms of what I am supposed to cover. Story: my work visa expired about a month ago, and I applied for it about 3 weeks before it expired. The application needed to be accompanied with some kind of authentication by my supervisor, who is notoriously pompous and inefficient. Even though she never answers my texts or phone calls, I managed to follow up on the authentication submission twice, and both times she said to me that she had more important matters to attend to. About 3 days before my work visa expired, I followed up again, and she said that the issuing office would inform the company when my documents were ready. Being a boomer, I don't think that she knew that I could literally check the status of the application. It was never sent until about 2 weeks after my visa had expired. Feeling very not important and not willing to risk illegally working in a foreign country, I turned off my work phone and went home. I informed the other higher-ups of what was going on and told them that I won't be able to come to work since I was technically in the country on a tourist visa. Anything that was pressing, I was able to do from home. However, a huge meeting was coming up, and while it should have initially been something my supervisor was tasked with, I got stuck with sharing it with her. Surprise! A few weeks go by and the people involved in this meeting are getting antsy because nothing is being done on our side. Shocker. And the supervisor starts panic emailing me about being more involved. I tell her that I'd help and only did exactly what she asked me to do to help. I gave no guidance on anything, as my role at the company was not important enough to be any more engaged than that. Anyway, she spent more time trying to delegate tasks and doing paperwork, trying to give me access to portals she already had access to, than actually doing the work. The only time she is efficient is when she's trying to pass work off onto other people. We ended up missing a bunch of deadlines and had to cancel quite a few of the meetings, and people aren't pleased. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm just an unimportant tourist. I highly recommend this in any workplace regardless of what type of job you do. If your supervisor treats you with minimal value and minimal importance and thinks your contribution is hardly noteworthy, then call them on their bluff. Challenge their perception. Let management see the consequences of the situation. Sometimes that's the only way to show them exactly how much you're worth to the company. And then once they acknowledge that you do a lot of hard work once you're back and working, sit down with them and say, okay, let's talk about a raise. This next story comes to us from Personal Lavishness 4. We're going to have to throw them away. Let's jump right in. In the late 90s, I volunteered at a small private school. They had little money for extras like computers, or computer teachers. I don't know much about computers, but I knew how to plug them in, and I know how to put one together, if you gave me all the parts. So naturally, I got asked to be the director of the computer lab. It had 2 very old computers, and naturally, it was a volunteer job. I had very little money and a lot of time. They knew that I wanted a job. They told me that after I build it up, they would put a salary in the budget. I taught classes the difference between the components, some file structure, some basic, some DOS, and how rebooting your computer usually solves whatever problems you have. The concept of drivers. The thing is, the director of the school hated fundraising, so my salary never got added to the budget, and the director often kept himself busy doing other things, useless things. One sunny morning, he finds me and tells me to wish him luck. If today goes right, we're gonna have a huge computer lab. He comes back from his meeting with a huge smile. I did it! I convinced a bank to donate to us their old computers. Okay, great. Now I have to set up and maintain 50 new, to us, computers. I can't wait. The computers got delivered the next week. All terminals. These were bank computers. I had no idea how to get them running. They didn't have hard drives or operating systems. The keyboard and mouse ports were different. They were not the standard PS2 at the time. I think they somehow connected to a server, which did not get donated. Their monitors only did text, no graphics. They were useless to us. We needed something to run America Online, Encarta, maybe SimCity, educational stuff. I had no idea how to get these to work. I tried asking the director, telling him that the 50 computers weren't useful. He got super annoyed. I'm sure they can be helpful in some way. They must be worth something. Figure it out, because if you can't, we're going to have to throw them away. He thought he was threatening me. He did not think I'd throw out 50 computers. After all, he worked hard to get them. I did not hesitate at all. My next class, I had screwdrivers for everyone. We disassembled everything. If it had a screw, we unscrewed it. The class figured out what each piece was, and then the class activity was to take the pieces to the dumpster. By the end of the day, there was nothing left. The next day, the director asked me where the computers were. Oh, you were right, they were very useful. The students took them apart, learned all about the different components, and then threw them out, just like you said we should. His face turned all sorts of colors, and he stormed out. What I didn't tell him is that I saved the RAM from the garbage. I mean, after all, it was in the garbage, right? And sold them on the online classifieds, remember Yahoo classifieds, for $20 a piece. There were 2 in each computer, so I got $2,000. I guess they were useful after all. OP, I have nothing but the utmost of respect for you. You taught those students without getting any compensation for yourself. So, taking some things out of a dumpster and making a little bit of cash off of it doesn't seem like a bad thing to me. Now, I know there's some people in the comments that are saying, wow, how could you throw that out and all that? But I guess a lot of people don't understand what dumb terminals are and just how useless they are for any other application. I'm willing to bet that the time you spent with those students got some of them really interested in computers and pushed them down the path to doing something computer related in the future. This next story comes to us from NaughtyCat890. Didn't go above and beyond? I'll delete everything I did above and beyond. Let's jump right in. The original owner of the business I worked for was amazing. I'll call him Larry. He cared about every employee and realized how much we helped the company with our respective positions. He had even let me go negative on my sick time once when I was hospitalized for a week following a double pulmonary embolism, with the agreement that I would work the time back, and I did. Just painting a picture of how wonderful Larry was as our boss. Larry finally retired after 45 years of running the business and sold it to his son, who I'll call Eric. Most people know how bad an idea that is, but Larry thought his son could handle it. He couldn't at first, but that's another story. Eric thought I wasn't doing enough during working hours, office job, dealing with inventory coming into a retail store. But what he failed to realize was that since I worked up there for 6 years and got familiar with the work, I was really efficient at the job. So much so that I had collected more responsibilities each year. Larry was one of the main people pushing for me to take on more each year, with immediate raises every time something was added. Eric didn't have the same mentality. Eric fired me for being too inactive for too long during the day. And another reason, which isn't important here, also another story for another time. So I was really active for my last 3 days with deleting everything I had created for the company. It was all above and beyond work. So since I didn't ever go above and beyond, they didn't deserve to keep it. It was signs for products, pictures gathered for advertising, vendor contact information, a program I designed to keep organized and on time for invoices, a manual I had typed up on how to do my job. They had an old version of my job instructions, but by that time they were practically obsolete, especially with all my extra duties collected over the years. In the 2 years I've been gone, they've had at least 8 people hired for my position who quit within a couple of months. I keep getting updates every few months from one of my friends in that office. OP, I think a golden opportunity is knocking here for you. You need to get in touch with that wonderful boss, Eric, the one that fired you. Mention that you've heard a lot of people have gone through that place in the last little while trying to do the job that you used to do so effortlessly. And then offer to come in as a consultant to train the next person in that position at about 3 times your old wage. See what they say, might be worth it. This next story comes to us from Glyph of Ad Blocking. Schedule Black Magic. Let's jump right in. First, a disclaimer. This occurred in a country that has both an awesome set of labor standards and the common practice of companies ignoring them, especially in my field. I was starting a new job. The basic contract had no serious red flags. After signing, the owner asked if I would be willing to work late 1 or 2 days to go home early 1 or 2 early. I told her it was fine as long as it wasn't even trade. Later, she said that I should be at work 30 minutes early because work starts at 9 a.m. sharp. I met with the manager once before the start date and she said the same thing about coming early. I decided to see how the rest of the work and schedule went before making a stink about it. If the hours were lax and they let us go home after wrapping up, no big deal. I started my first day and the schedule was a train wreck. I'm scheduled to work late 3 days and go home early 1 day. Hours work out to 40, but still not what I verbally agreed to. Breaks are 15 to 30 minutes throughout the day, and our labor standards state that for 40 hours, there should be a minimum of a 1-hour block. Besides the small breaks, work was straight through 9 to 6. Breaks are unpaid and don't count against the 40 in this country, but are still mandatory. Even after you wrap up your duties, you're expected to stay. Whenever I just mentioned needing to talk about it, the manager just said, "It's okay," or "We can't change it now," and refused to even listen. Cue malicious compliance. I kept meticulous records of my time, and I combed the labor standards. More than 8 hours of work per day is overtime. More than 40 hours of work per week is overtime. Any break that doesn't meet the minimum requirements is considered work, overtime. The owner asks me for a meeting when I'm on my way out of the door, more overtime. After the first month, I handed the owner my invoice for overtime payment. She was livid. "Coming in 30 minutes early was a suggestion." No, I was told to do it by 2 supervisors. "The breaks add up to 1 hour each day." Doesn't matter, they should be a solid hour, not piecemeal. "The meeting was just us talking." You told me you needed to talk to me, you didn't ask. "You agreed to work late some days." Yes, for an even trade. This schedule isn't even. "Why didn't you talk to us?" I tried and the manager refused. The owner took the invoice and said she'd think about it. Her husband was a lawyer, so I'm sure she looked for ways to fight it. In the end, I was paid. My schedule was magically reworked to meet the requirements, and they begged me not to tell the other workers. Epilogue: I didn't directly tell the coworkers, but I did drop big hints about the labor standards when they asked about my schedule versus theirs. Sadly, they never pushed the issue. During the year I was there, I saw huge employee turnover. They were simply overworked. One poor worker cried at least once a week. Only 2 workers that were there when I started remained when I left. The turnover led to client retention issues, which led to downsizing for the next cycle. I think what I would have done on my last day working at that place is provide all of my coworkers with the resources they needed to educate themselves and fight for themselves. You said in the comments that some of them would be eligible for back pay up to 3 years. That's a lot of money, and there would be some very happy people if you just gave them a nudge in the right direction. Check out all 5 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.